Don't think you all won yesterday.
Not on the recording.
Most important thing of the weekend. Most important thing of the weekend.
We go live. We'll admit the people on the from the lobby now.
Just wait till 8 o'clock, Santa, to give you people.
Yeah, just let's give 1 more minute.
So, okay, good morning, everybody. Thanks very much who's admitted the lobby. We're just going to give it a few more minutes for people to join before we kick off, and I hand over to Santosh to kick us off for a minute.
Okay. Okay. Good morning, all. We'll probably get started while others join on the way. First of all, warm welcome to you all. We are delighted to welcome you all to the PMO Community of Practice event. This event is sponsored by Auxilion. My name is Santosh Joshi, and I'll be your host today. This webinar is being recorded for the future reference. Before we commence, let me make an important announcement here. This will be regarding the special message that our President Jackie Fagan is going to announce towards the end of this session. Stay tuned and look forward to this special message. We will be using the Menti poll for this webinar. Pick up your mobile phone or the laptop and go to www.menti.com. The code to use for the Menti poll is on your screen. It is my pleasure to welcome you all, and we look forward for your interactive session. I welcome the Ireland chapter of PMI past president, Jackie Glenn, to introduce speakers and to take forward the session. Jackie, over to you.
Thanks very much, Santosh, and good morning, everybody. Well done to everybody for attending our breakfast session this morning. As past president and more importantly, head of PMO Community of Practice in the Ireland chapter of PMI, we initiated this community of practice late last year. And this is our second event in terms of trying to pull together that PMO community of practice, provide a forum for discussion for people who are interested in this space. What we have this morning is we have a big thank you to our speakers this morning. We have Dr. Joe Peppard, who is going to do a fireside chat with Brian Ryan, who was one of our National Awards finalists in the PMO category last year. And the subject of their discussion is getting clinical about your PMO. So really interested to understand how ICON and Brian have navigated implementation of their PMO in such a diverse industry. I think what Brian will take us on a journey of is talking about building a capability about strategic project management, ultimately building a project management function in the organization. And he refers to the key points or key characteristics of that function, which is to have visibility, value add, authority, and autonomy. Today's session will take the format of Joe and Brian having a chat. Please feel free to use the chat because we'll integrate it into the conversation if you have questions. If not, we'll take it at the end. At the midway point, or about 40 minutes in, Santosh will be asking you a number of questions via Mentimeter. These are really important because we want to get your say in the topics you would like to discuss going forward in this PMO community of practice. So take the opportunity to give us your feedback so we can frame the discussions going forward to the areas of interest that suit you. And then lastly, Terence, and not least, is going to present the results, some further results of the research that himself and Joe did last year on the National Award winners in the PMO category for the Ireland chapter of PMI in 2020-2021. So a lot ahead of us. Grab your coffee. Really excited to hear these excellent practitioners in this space to give their time this morning. So without further ado, Joe, I'll hand over the reins to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Jackie, for that introduction. So for those of you kind of maybe joining us for the first time, this is the second event that we have ran within the kind of the community of practice looking at PMOs. You might recall that the first event where we launched the community of practice, we had a really superb presentation from Clio regarding the PMO at revenue, and actually they were last year's winner of the category. And we thought today we would do it slightly differently because it does take, as you probably are all aware, a lot of preparation to pull together a kind of a 30-minute presentation. So rather than ask our kind of speaker to do that, what we thought actually might be more efficient, both for Brian, which we'll introduce in a moment, and may also draw out perhaps some insights, some lessons that often when you're in the thick of something that you may not actually see as being kind of revealing or insightful. And I have interviewed Brian and some of the executives at ICON, so I've got a good insight as to their PMO and how they built it up and what they're looking to achieve. So I hope that during this conversation, I will be able to draw out at least some of the insights that I thought would be worth sharing with the community. So maybe to start, rather than me introducing Brian Ryan, who's the head of PMO at ICON, maybe Brian, if I could ask you to introduce yourself and maybe just a little bit of your background that led you to the role of head of the PMO.
Sure. Thanks, Joe, and thanks, Jackie, and everyone else in the PMI. Thanks very much for the invitation to do this, despite the early hour, but thank you. Yeah, so I'm the head of the IT PMO in ICON Clinical Research, and I'll explain it, give a little bit of an overview of the company in a minute, just for those who may not be aware of who we are. But I'm probably the head of the PMO for the last 4 or 5 years. It is an IT function that I'm in, so I do report to the CIO. We have multiple other PMOs in the organization, which I'll go through as well in a second. I was trying to, I guess, add up the number of years I've been in the PMO or project management kind of industry, if that's the right phrase. That's probably 20, 25 years or so, give or take. Lots of different roles: project leads, project managers, program managers, analyst roles, governance roles, business partner roles, etc., right? So it's I probably had the years slightly wrong, right? But it's been quite a while, and I dabbled in a couple of other areas as well, like software development, IT support, those type of things in my earlier days. Quickly realized they weren't really for me, to be honest. Very similar to realizing that I was never going to be a professional football player. So here I am now in project management, and it served me quite well, to be honest with you. And it's something that's I've been involved in now for quite a long time, as I said. So maybe if I could just give a quick overview, Joe, of
yeah, please do talk. Yes, introduce,
yeah.
kind of to provide really some context. Talk a little bit about ICON. A company that is is a global leader in clinical trials that effectively started out in Dundrum.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll just share 1 or 2 slides in a second. Obviously, we're not going to have too many slides. Not going to bore people with those. But yeah, look, I think I'm obviously biased, but it's I think ICON is one of the real Irish success stories. It was founded back in 1990, so over 30 years ago, by two doctors, effectively, who saw a gap in the market or saw an opportunity. They made lots of sacrifices and set up the company in Dundrum with 3 other employees, I guess. So there was 5 people started in a very small office in Dundrum, in Dublin, and we're now a 38,000 strong company. offices all over the world. I think 90 odd offices, 117 offices as I look at my slide here, across 46 countries. So it's a huge success story, and it's something that, you know, it's not a company that's really been in the media so much, I guess. It would have been a little bit more with the COVID vaccine trials. We were heavily involved in the main Pfizer BioNTech one. We project managed the clinical trial related to that one. So that got a bit more attention, I guess, in the media. And you know, what we do is it's one of those. I find project management is something that's very hard to explain to your parents or your grandparents or whatever, right, as to what the job actually is. And then clinical trials in the industry that we're in is another one of those where it's quite difficult to maybe explain, or for people to understand at times. Certainly my parents and my grandparents, maybe others not so much. But so what it is effectively is, you know, it's ultimately about bringing new drugs, new medicines to the market, and to improve the quality of life for people. I mean, that's ultimately what it is. We work with most of the large pharmaceutical companies, large, small, with biotech companies, et cetera, and they effectively outsource the clinical trials to us. We're a CRO, so it's a contract research organization, is the technical term for it. But ultimately, what John and Ronan, who are the founders of ICON, realized is a company like ourselves can manage clinical trials quicker and more efficiently than pharma companies, generally speaking. And therefore, there's quite a large industry in doing this, and you know, there's quite a number of other CROs. We are, with our latest acquisition, which was a company slightly larger than ourselves, we are right up there in terms of number one, number two in the market globally across most of our services. So ultimately, look, as some of you will have seen from the recent vaccine trials, what this is about is we come up with a new drug, a new medicine, new molecule, whatever it may be, and it's about testing it in people. And the first step, it's multiple phases. The first step of that is to test it in healthy people who do not have the disease or the condition that we're trying to help with. Maybe a few hundred of those people over a couple of months, whatever, maybe a bit longer, a year or two, depending. Prove that it's safe. Initially, that's the first piece. Make sure that it's safe, and then the next phase is to move on to testing it in a small group of people who do have the condition or the disease that we're trying to help, and also then prove that it actually works as well as that it's safe. And then once you prove that, you move on to a much larger trial that can last several years before, and that's a phase 3 trial typically, and then before we move into bringing it to market, getting regulatory approval, putting it out there into the world, hopefully making a big difference. And then there's further trials typically after that. So once it's being used in the market and people have been using it, there are trials continue to make sure that it is working, and also that it is safe. And also the other piece is that it's better than something else that's out there in the world today. So obviously it's a company we can kind of be proud to work for as well. It's doing a lot of good things, to be honest, right? So let me I'm just going to show one or two very quick slides and then I'll move on and we'll talk about the PMO itself. So, sorry, I'll just put that in full screen mode. So just for hopefully that's okay there. So again, 38,000 people. So we were, up until about a year ago, we were about 16,000 people. We made a major acquisition of PRA, one of our big competitors at the time. And we now have more than doubled our workforce, more than doubled our revenue, more than doubled our IT portfolio and our project management portfolio, which I'll come to in a second as well. And we're around for 32 years, as I said. We are a Dublin company, and that's really important. And we'll talk a little bit about culture later on today. You know, our culture and our ICON heritage and our ICON, you know, origins are very important to ICON. We've got about maybe 1,000 or 1,100 people in Ireland, across the 38,000 people, but it still is to the core and our roots of everything that we do. And you'll see a picture of Dublin there, the Halfpenny Bridge, etc. Our mission is to save or to improve the lives of patients. We're all about accelerating development of drugs, etc. And innovation is a big piece. And there's just a quick picture of all our office opening in 1990, all the way through to acquisitions, all sorts of different stuff, right? And then finally, here's just a quick picture of where we are in the world. So that was just a very quick, I don't want to bore you with slides and that type of stuff, but that was just a quick overview of where we are. Let me just unshare that, and I will, sorry.
All right, while you do that, Brian, thank you very much. So it's essentially a clinical trial is sort of run like a project.
Yeah.
And then you've also got strategic initiatives that themselves are running like run like a project and project management. Maybe you might want to talk about that and maybe use that as an introduction to the PMO, why a decision was made to establish a PMO, and maybe a little bit about the history and the evolution of the PMO to where it is today.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a good point. Like ultimately, everything we do is project management, and whether it's me or the running of the clinical trials, whatever. It's running a clinical trial, every phase that I mentioned and every sub phase or sub piece of work is a project. We have a huge amount of project managers in our company who are managing clinical trials. They might be managing the overall trial. They might be managing certain elements of it. So there's a whole program aspect to it as well. And delivery is our focus. Basically, we need to deliver to our customers. Delivery, etc. is some of the words that are used, obviously, as most of you would be familiar with. And that is persuasive throughout the whole company. We have deadlines to meet, we've got customers to meet, we've got budgets, we've got issues and risks to track, we've got milestones, etc. Every month or every year of a clinical trial is really important before your patent runs out, before you need to getting drugs to market, getting patients into a clinical trial. All those key milestones, key data points are hugely critical to improving the quality of life for people. So project management is what we do. We're a people company, we're a data company, we're an innovation company, we're a services company. But to the core of a lot of that is project management. Our CEO is a project manager at heart as well. He's been a project manager down the years, and a lot of what we do is around just managing our milestones, managing our metrics, which a lot of what all of us are used to doing day to day, to be honest with you. And I guess the PMO itself here, the IT PMO, the one that I run, I mean, it was formed 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago as a formal thing. Prior to that, we used to run lots of projects, but there was no structure, no real structure, no consistent structure. People just kind of did what they wanted, as you'd expect from, let's say, an immature, project management capability from an IT perspective and from an investment perspective. Over the last 4 or 5 years, we've really evolved that, really matured that. And one of the first things that we did was put it in a place that was quite senior. So, when we created the formal PMO, we made it reporting, if you like, to the CIO. We had it at a very elevated position in the company. We did more than run projects. So over time, we started to really get involved in the overall investment governance and into value add, into trying to make sure we do the right projects, not just the next project on the list as such, or not the first come first served, if you like. So I became the head of the PMO, as I said, about 4 or 5 years ago. I had done program management, project management roles. I was a business partner at one stage. I was involved in governance, etc. So I was probably ideally placed across lots of different areas to be able to hopefully bring it to the next stage, hopefully. And I guess what we do a range of different things. While we do run projects as our bread and butter, we do own the investment governance as well. So we do make sure that there is an approach and a process to budget approval, to business case approval, to making sure that from the ideation all the way through to implementation, and then to follow on all the way through to return on investment, status updates, and making sure that we actually got the benefits and the value from the original investment. That's quite a tricky piece, and I know we'll touch on it a bit later, but it's something that we're not, we've a lot to do yet still in that area, but it's something that's core to what we do.
Right. Brian, maybe can you just talk a little bit as well about how you work with other, let's say, groups within the IT organization, within ICON in general? So with architecture, for example, cybersecurity, because obviously they're key components of a typical project.
Yeah. So the way things work here in ICON, and I'm sure elsewhere as well, is when someone has an idea, I guess, it goes on a list, right, as a starter point. And what we try and do is get the people who who want to make an investment or want to change how they run their function to articulate the problem. So it's not about the solution, it's about the problem. And that involves then the starter point of that is while the PMO are involved in that and are involved in initiating that and have the process around that. That's really some other groups that we work with. So you've got the business partner function, who are actively involved in looking at the overall strategy for individual functions. They will engage as well with the enterprise architecture group, who will help to, bring that problem into a solution mode, if you like, right? So there's options, there's solutions, and then as part of that, you're trying to build out a business case. So you've got your problem identified. You're identifying your solution to solve that problem, or maybe an opportunity as well, of course. And then you're working with various groups like your security groups to make sure that it's, from a cybersecurity perspective, to make sure it's safe, etc. We've got our data privacy, our data protection areas to make sure, from a GDPR and elsewhere, reviews of that. We've got an enterprise architecture review to make sure, of course, that it does fit in with our overall strategy. And our data models, etc. So there's quite a wide, there's probably about 10 or 12 different groups that are actually involved in the pulling together of a business case. Finance have a heavily involvement as well, of course, right, in terms of pulling out savings, revenue, efficiency gains, etc., whatever it may be, to come up with an ROI. So we're very much focused. One of the things that we changed over the last couple of years is putting together a consistent business case approach. So we've got to articulate the problem, articulate the benefits, put people's names against the benefits. That's an important one. Accountability is huge. So if you say you're going to bring in 50% ROI, 100% ROI, if you want to bring, various savings, various revenue or new revenue over the next few years, someone's name goes against that, and then we will chase that up post-approval. So we do work with all those other groups. It's a heavy collaboration. We obviously work with our development, our test groups. We're also quite regulated. So the FDA, EMA, various other regulatory bodies in Europe and the US and in England, various places, we have to comply with the regulations. And if the project that we're doing deals with clinical data or patient data, and any kind of sensitive data, we've got to follow a lot of regulations and make sure we're compliant with that.
So Brian, just so the business case process, so you're supporting the business sponsor, the business unit president in building the case. Do you actually build a case, or is it just that you make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, as well as providing advice and guidance through that process?
Yeah, so we tend to be consultants as well as overseeing the governance and make sure it's done right. But we ultimately don't really create the business case. And when we've built up a lot of expertise and knowledge over the years into what makes a good business case and we have an investment approval board, or IAB, which our CEO and CFO and CIO and about another 4 or 5 senior executives sit on. And we kind of know what's required. But ultimately, the project sponsor, who is mainly someone in a various business function, sitting alongside the business partner and the finance, the kind of head of finance in that area, they're the ones who tend to put it together and make sure that it's, they get the pitch right, they get the finances right, the benefits right, etc. And we guide them through that, but we don't do it for them. No, I think that's important, right? They need to do that themselves, and they need to be able to make sure it's a solid business case themselves.
Yeah. Now, as you mentioned the focus, I think the current focus on benefits realization, and you've also sort of alluded to the fact that you still have a lot of work to do there. But what I really liked when I was talking to some of your colleagues was the fact that the CEO will look to a business sponsor, a business unit president, to demonstrate 1, 2, 3 years after the project officially ends that the actual benefits that were articulated in the business case have actually been delivered. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, because from when I was beginning to hear that story, it sort of, felt like there was sort of this kind of self-reinforcing cycle in the sense that obviously you don't want to appear before the IAG and sort of show that actually you haven't delivered on your business case. So that probably means that the business case is a more accurate reflection of reality, and people tend not to overstate benefits because there's a big chance they'll be caught out downstream.
Yeah, and that's huge, right? And there's still a way to go in that, I'll be honest, right? It's been quite a challenge. I mean, ultimately, it used to be nearly the false threat years ago, where you would promise X, Y, and Z, but there was no follow-up. You would never be checked. You'd never be asked the question, did you actually do that, etc. Where now it's a lot different. Well, it doesn't happen in every case, and we're trying to get to that, but ultimately, it is there. So what we try and do every year is we look at all the projects that were actually went live within the last probably 12 months or so. And we have various criteria for prioritizing which ones that we look at first. But we do ask them to come back to our IAB, our Investment Approval Board, and actually present their how they get on, the status against their benefits and their ROI. In some cases, it'll happen because they're coming in looking for more money. Right, so they have an investment. Some of them come in every year, or every 6 months, or every 18 months, whatever, and look for more money, and they must come back and present what they did with the last investment, and was it a success. In other cases, we bring them back anyway, even though they're not looking for more money as such, right? And that's big, right? So we have, we look for them to commit against a couple of different things, whether it be savings, efficiencies, risk reduction, revenue, etc. And someone's name, as I said earlier, is against each of those areas, and it's also against the overall ROI. So we might bring them back, 12 months after a go live, and say, their overall ROI may be over 3 years, 4 years maybe, but where were they supposed to be after 12 months or 18 months? How are they doing against that? And to kind of explain what happened since, etc. And the other interesting piece is that our CEO, especially Steve, he will look at prior performance as such, in terms of, will you get more investment? So he will go back and look and say, well, actually, did you do a good job? Did you come through on your commitments from your previous investment? And also, how are you doing operationally? So we do look at our operational performance, whether that be revenue, whether that be timelines, metrics, whether it be savings, margin, etc., etc. Some of those are commercial, obviously, and some are more about bringing metrics around clinical trial process and doing it quicker and more efficiently. But a lot of people's investments are trying to improve that. There's a huge push, I suppose, for a clinical trial. The startup phase of a clinical trial is absolutely key. It takes quite a while to, bring on board doctors or investigators, as we call them, sites, which is hospitals, doctor surgeries, clinics, whatever it may be. It takes quite a while to get them all on board and to bring on patients, people who have the condition they were trying to help. To get the relevant people who can go into a trial can take quite a long time. So there's a lot of people looking for investment to try and improve that. So there's a lot of focus on that, and saying, well, actually, have you improved it? We'll give you money if you can improve it, or can you, and if you can follow through on that, then we'll give you more each year, potentially, depending.
Yeah, and so if you were to summarize, so where does accountability for benefits reside? So is it reside then in the business, clearly on the business side, as we say, or is it more on the IT side, or is it joint accountability? How does that work?
Yeah, well, in theory, it's with the business group as such, right? And it is, but obviously IT and ourselves have a big accountability there as well, in terms of the PMO. We need to make sure things get delivered. Now, it is the business sponsor and the business head that will come back and present, and rightly so, right? And they need to take full ownership of that. But we in the IT group and the PMO group can't just kind of stand back and say, well, We deliver that to you. Off you go. Up to you. We do have a, there is an expectation that we will actually push them and make sure that they are using it. So adoption is key. The whole change management. So one thing I didn't mention earlier that might be obvious to lots of people on this call, but while I'm in IT and a lot of what we do are IT projects, the term IT projects really is, well, in the majority of cases, business change, right? So it's, we run a few technical projects where we're upgrading, technical stuff, but it's mostly around where we're making business change to process, change to how people do their job day to day, and that's key. So a lot of our team have a lot of expertise in working through that, and therefore then there's an extra element to our job, which is to firstly to make sure before we go live that it's ready to go live, that it does meet, that it is fit for purpose, and then to have some follow up. Our business partner function, which is slightly outside of our PMO, although we do sit hand in hand in a lot of cases, they do a lot of liaising with the business functions to make sure that they are using the system, they are using the process, and it is working. We will also take an accountability, because we do know that if it doesn't work 6 months later or 12 months later, as in every walk of life, there can be various finger pointing, right? And we're deliberately, we want to really make sure that it's successful as well.
Right. You've kind of alluded to culture, and particularly the strong emphasis within the company on delivery. Maybe can you talk a little bit about the role, as you see, that culture plays both within projects themselves and kind of the overall focus and emphasis of the PMO?
Sure. Yeah. And there's been a massive focus on culture and what is culture, etc., right, in ICON over the last couple of years. It's, we've obviously always had a culture, and everyone has a culture, whatever that may be. But there was, we had a probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago maybe, our head of HR, working in conjunction with our CEO and our senior leadership team, really put a huge focus on trying to understand what our culture is or was, and documenting that. So we now have banners all over the offices everywhere, around what our core values are around our culture. So we had a lot of workshops in probably every function actually, to discuss what culture is and what culture meant to us and what is our culture. And then we tried to encapsulate that in a couple of key phrases, if you like. And we've since evolved that because of such a massive acquisition there in the last July. We've obviously tried to combine all that into our various elements of culture. And accountability and delivery is absolutely core to that. We have a circle, if you like, which talks about the 4 quadrants of our values, and in the middle of that is own it. And that's all around accountability, whether that's accountability for delivering projects or accountability for whatever it may be. And that's to our clients and for our internal customers. And that drives a real delivery focus. So the kind of motto we have in the PMO is find a way. Every project has issues, we know that. We try to set them up for success. We try to make sure they're really, all the due diligence is done. But we all talk about everyone has a plan until you're smacked in the face type stuff, and I mean that's really true, as we all know. And it's but our focus is find a way to get it done, find a way to go live when you said you'd go live, etc. And that focus has seen our success rate of the PMO go from maybe 40-50% projects on time and on budget back in 2014-15. Up, steady graph, if you like, rising up to about 69-70, early 70% about 2 years ago. We got into the 90s last year, which, not sure if we'll sustain that because of all the issues that can happen, but you can see a steady rise up, based on the behavior, I suppose, and the focus on that, and everybody's going in the same direction, and the whole company is, and it's great to see, right? I mean, and also the other values that we have articulated are things like agility, things like collaboration, partnership, and inclusion and integrity are things that have come in over the last while. And again, there's been a huge focus on those, doing the right thing, inclusion, DIBS as we call it, diversity, inclusion and belonging, which again are, core to the company, core to the PMO, and actually core to clinical trials as well. Having diverse patients is an important piece. So anyway, I could probably talk a little bit longer on that one, but I'm just conscious of time, I guess, Joe.
Great. No, thanks for that, and Brian. And maybe how do you sort of keep the PMO relevant? Because we know from research that a lot of PMOs are established to great fanfare, and then after a year or two sort of fizzle out. So how have you managed to kind of keep it going and to keep it relevant?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it can be difficult, right? But we're I think the fact that we are now more actively involved in the start of the process than we would have been a few years ago. We are actively involved in doing the right projects. So not, as I said earlier, not doing the next project on the list. We meet monthly with our investment approval board, which I mentioned earlier as our CEO, CIO, etc., CFO, and we don't just use that for business case submissions. We do use it to look to prioritize our investments and look at our roadmap, especially over the next 12 months. We'll probably evolve that then to be over a longer term period, but we tend to look at, well, what are the key investments to really drive forward our strategy, right? So we've got a lot better in that over the last couple of years. We still have a ways to go in that, in fairness, but it's that's a huge piece because it allows the PMO to be involved in more of a value-driven PMO. And I know the PMI had a presentation or a thing a couple of years ago on value-driven PMO, etc. Right? And I think that's where we get involved in prioritization, etc., and try and set that. That's a huge piece, to be honest with you, and having that seat at the table, and then being able to do a lot more reporting on ROI and benefits and stuff later on is also there. We talk about agile a little bit as well, I guess, right? And I think agile can mean different things to different people, I guess, right? Obviously you've got the agile, project management processes, and you've got your waterfall, you've got your hybrid, you've got all sorts of stuff. You also have agility, I guess, or agile in terms of the PMO and how we bring forward our overall investments. We do chop and change things quite a bit, depending on how things change. We do a huge amount of acquisitions. We have a roadmap, we have a strategy, we have everything linear, driven out as such, for want of a better phrase. But we do have to be flexible. We do adjust. We do adjust our budgets. We do adjust our where we focus our attention from time to time and where we need to be. So yeah, I mean, we do lots of different things. I think with the acquisition, we now have a much bigger portfolio, much bigger PMO, much wider visibility as well, and a much more focus on where we're spending our money. We do quite a large capital investment program every year. It's a percentage of our revenue, so it keeps growing. Our revenue keeps growing, and we're kind of at the table, I guess, in terms of trying to help determine where that's spent. And just finally, I know I'm in IT, but we actually do cover things like our facilities, our real estate investment, our laboratory investment, our lab equipment investment as well. We may not run those projects, but we are involved in those from an overall governance and investment perspective.
Brian and Joe, can I just nudge you there, Joe? There's an awful lot of interesting questions coming up the chat. Maybe I could ask you to maybe table some of them to Brian in your next,
I don't actually see the chat here.
Okay, so let me ask a few things.
Please, Jackie, yeah.
If that's okay. Okay.
Yeah, please.
So so there's definitely, let me go backwards first. The challenges when you had setting up the PMO and any tips of what to do or to avoid, Brian, was one of the questions.
Okay. Probably lots, right? Again, I think where the PMO sits is important. I think having even simple stuff like consistent approaches. So, and if we have time, I can even quickly show our business case template there. I have it ready to show as such, but even putting out simple, consistent templates, even simply, right? So everybody uses things the same way. Making sure you've got a good governance process, which can take time, I know, and you've got to sell that, I guess, and you've got to sell the reason for that, the benefits for that. Also, one big change that we made, which was fundamental, was people were always rushing for the solution. I want to put this system in, I want to do this, I know what the answer is. And it's like, well, can we step back a second? What's the problem you're trying to solve? What's the opportunity? and getting that sorted first, because what we found was, years ago, we were putting money into things that maybe weren't strategic. Maybe we didn't even need to solve that problem. And it's to get the problem articulated, first of all, approved, and then you can start getting into all the detail of, well, what's the solution? What's the business case? So that's a game changer, I'll be honest.
That's a great point. That's a great point, Brian, because it does. You just take the words out. It takes the mindset. Very often, what I found in my experience, if you have to articulate the problem, then people aren't rushing to the solution and they can't articulate the problem, which then stops you investing money in things that aren't really going to be fruitful or strategic intent. On that point, I think somebody had asked, in relation to the other PMOs in the organisation, which you mentioned at the outset, is there much interaction between the PMOs? Do they follow the same metrics, processes? That was the question from a member in our audience today.
Not as much at all as we should have, I'll be honest, right? So that's one of the things we need to grow on that. So we do have interaction. We do use some of the same systems for some pieces. We sometimes go in each other's coattails for, let's say, larger project management systems, etc. But that's one of the things we do have every so often have interactions. And we also do share information across project management roles and that type of stuff. But that's something that we certainly need to, where I'd like to see a lot of improvement, I'll be honest.
There was some questions around metrics. You mentioned OKRs, and I suppose the question was, do you have a general structure of these? Do you use them by area, only for the overall project? And I suppose, how are those OKRs then taken into business operations? So is that real strategy from execution from the project KPIs and then making sure that it can deliver into the business? So I think that's where the question is coming from. How does that translate from your perspective?
Yeah, so again, and that's back to, I suppose, the consistent templates as such, right? And the approach that we do, and we manage all the normal project metrics, of course, but when we report bi-weekly and monthly, depending on, and we report up to very senior management across all projects and across the portfolio. We use our RAG statuses across the normal stuff, but we do have a RAG status then against the benefits and against the ROI and against the change management. So a lot of those as well. So we don't just focus on time and budget and scope, which we do, of course, focus on them, but we've taken it onto another level of RAG status against the key, which is all around, is this project on track to be a success? Yeah. So if you're on time and on budget, but actually, you've realized your ROI is not going to come in at all, then do you continue that type of stuff?
Or your change, or your organization isn't ready for the change, that's even more, serious. Exactly. You had a very interesting conversation there, Joe, around benefits, and I loved the whole thing of your operational capability feeding, and have you been given money before and did you make a success of it, and demonstrating that kind of, I suppose, track record of taking care of the investment. I suppose in terms of that 3-year cycle of going back, I personally am interested to know who validates the benefits. Is a combination of does the PMO give oversight or transparency of that process, and is it done by finance, and ultimately it comes into the owners, the business owners, project owners or initiative owners P&L. So interested in how that kind of cycle, what it is to be able to give that transparency 3 or 4 years later.
Yeah, so we've had a challenge in who's going to own that process, right, and who's going to go after it all for a period. So we've taken that on in the PMO as part of it, because we own the end-to-end process. But the people who need to validate it directly so finance are heavily involved in that, and the business owners themselves. So they kind of look back and say, well, whether it be efficiencies or whether it be savings or whether it be revenue, whatever. So some of that's transparent, and you can't, it's there in facts. Some of it's maybe a little bit more diluted if other things have happened in the organization. Sometimes it's quite difficult to attribute the investment or the change to the investment. That can be quite hard, obviously, and ultimately it turns into a conversation then at our IAB. They do get challenged on that, and again, that's something that we really want to. We're at the early days. We've done it quite well in certain areas, but I think we can really mature that whole piece over the next couple of years and really make that
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting area to track through, and I think you've probably hit the same roadblocks that most people who've done this kind of role which is how do you attribute a specific investment if it's associated with sales or whatever, because sales can happen for a variety of reasons in an organization, not just for the big investment that you do. One of the things that came up earlier on the discussion was with your discussion about clinical trials. It really came to the fore. Obviously, there's a hell of a lot of risk in terms of a clinical trial. And there was a little bit of conversation chat between me and Michael Casey around how does the fact that there are clinical trials that you're running differ in terms of the risk assessment profile you might do in the project, or does it make a difference is what the question is.
Oh, so that's a good question. So our group are not actively involved in the management of the clinical trials as such, right? We would typically be involved in the implementation of our investments to help that whole process. The whole risk profile of a clinical trial itself, obviously, as you said, yes, of course, it's risky. I mean, that would be handled by the other PMO as such, and the project management team, and there's a huge amount of assessment of what they call a protocol, which is ultimately how the trial is going to be run, what are success factors. But as we know, a lot of them may not be successful depending on the actual outcome as the results come back in and are assessed, etc. So that's all handled as a separate piece. But yeah, it's critical, yeah, for sure.
Okay. And then maybe one last question before we hand over to Santosh and then to Terence. Is there any suggestions how to move a company from new projects just appearing from different business units to a structured selection process? I think PMO is the answer to that question. Some kind of prioritization aligned to strategy, I think, is what you'd agree, Brian. Anything from your perspective?
Absolutely, Jackie. And you have to funnel the approval through one place. If you have multiple approval mechanisms, it's going to be very challenging. There's only one way to get capital money approved. Correct. And investment and, finance numbers even. You can't put money against it. So yeah, absolutely, one funnel.
I'd absolutely agree with that. Certainly in my experience, narrowing down the one funnel and the one way of getting money and getting resources is the only way to get that appearing projects disappeared from the whole organization landscape. Okay, Joe, Brian, I'm going to stop you there and just hand over to Santosh. Thank you so much. God, really insightful, Brian. Terrific journey you've been on. Thank you for sharing this morning. We're going to hand over to Santosh to do a quick Mentimeter poll, and then we'll move to Terence in terms of the research that has continued last year. Santosh.
Sure. Yeah, thanks a lot, Jackie. Thanks all. It was very interesting session with a lot of information to take forward from here. To all the people, please pick up your mobile phone or laptop. Again, I have entered the code to enter into the Mentipoll in the chat. Request your participation. So here comes your first question. From which city have you joined today's webinar? Yeah, I think a lot of people are joining from Dublin, but we do have a participation from other cities also. This also gives us a view about how distributed is the community across the Ireland.
I think it's just great to see, Santosh, that we're getting people outside Dublin, because, when we have that debate about, how many, and Jackie will probably allude to it, how many in-person events we do, it's difficult to travel from Galway to Dublin for a breakfast meeting, let's be honest. So one of the things we have in your next questions is just the timing of these and whether they're in person or not. So to get your point of view.
Sure. So team, we probably we close this question. We'll go to the next question. So this is regarding what is your preferred way of PMI events? Is it going to be virtual, in person? Or in-person event with an option to join virtually also?
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are preferring to have both options in place.
Yeah, combination of both.
Yeah. Great. We'll go to the next question. What is the preferred time for the PMO community of practice events?
Breakfast and lunch. Okay. Can we keep on asking those getting people on Mentimeter to do that while we hand over to Terence, Santosh?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
That'd be brilliant, Terence. Thank you, Santosh. Terence, can we hand over to you now to go through your presentation or your results of the research you and Joe conducted? That'd be great.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie, and nice to see a lot of familiar names in the chat this morning. I know it's a bit early for some of you, but hopefully you got something out of that session, which is really interesting. I'm not going to spend too much time on this session. I'm just really going to do a little bit of recapping on what myself and Joe have already completed, linking with the 4 organizations that are involved. But just a reminder, the research agenda that myself and Joe have progressed really hinged on 4 excellent shortlisted nominees for PMO of the Year for the Irish chapter last year. ICON obviously was one of them, as was the revenue commissioners, and also Medtronic and Ervia were also heavily represented in terms of the quality of the PMO. And it was such quality that we decided to take a look at what good looks like when it comes to those PMOs. And we've done quite a lot of work in terms of working with Brian and his team and all the others that were there to really surface the various factors that were involved in terms of what makes those particular PMOs quite good. Now, the whole PMO agenda and the evolution of that, this is a slide that we used from the first session, really emphasizing the fact that different PMOs have a different reference point. They're very functional orientated, IT, for example, or organizational orientated, or geared solely to deliver a large project or large program, and others are more strategic, you know. So the points that we surfaced at the time, integral cog in supporting the business agenda. I thought it was very interesting that Brian emphasized that point significantly this morning, as did Cleo in the earlier session. And indeed, all the notable PMOs of the level that we're talking about really moved into support and replicate the business KPIs and the business agenda. That's how they became sticky and relevant, you know, and that mimicking of the KPIs of the business. So one of the things we did, we surfaced previously was actually when you look at the KPIs of the PMO, 1 or 2 of them didn't have KPIs, right? Which initially, whoa. But actually what they were doing, they were mimicking the PMO, the KPIs of the business. So the return on the investment, did it deliver what's said in the tin, you know, that sort of stuff. But the whole thing continues to move mindset. Now, this is what I would call a PMO, even 2.0, which emerged a few years ago. This is one that Joe, one of his colleagues, pulled together, I guess maybe 10 years ago, where it'll be fairly typical of a PMO context thinking, which is, look, there's quadrants. If you look at on the left-hand side, you have the supply side of the house. And a lot of people, especially in the IT space, but indeed in the engineering utility space, they have a workforce that will deliver work. If that work is framed as projects, they're very much geared to that whole supply stuff. Some of it might be strategic and some of it might be operational, keep the lights on and so on and so forth. On the other side, on the right-hand side of that, you've got the demand cycle, right? Or the demand thread, where you look at what the business is looking for, realizing those outcomes, and then you've got a portfolio mindset. And over the years, people have thought, well, you start off in the lower left-hand box. It's all about putting standards in, executing consistently, right? And then you start to move from one box up, and maturing means you move into more strategic stuff. You get involved in the portfolio, and then you start to work, you know, business outcomes. And to be fair, I think myself and Joe probably had that reference point in terms of when we started to do the analysis. And in actual fact, we changed our minds a little bit, because when you got into especially the icons, the Medtronics and the revenues and the Ervia, that's not how it works. Brian made reference to multiple PMOs, right? And in the case of Medtronic, you had also multiple PMOs, and similar with Ervia. Revenue slightly different, But really, this is, to be fair to Joe, what Joe emerged with in terms of a paradigm to look, when people talk about the PMOs, there's a theme or a number of themes that emerge. So some PMOs are very much geared to value optimization. So that value management office thread we talked about previously that Brian referred to earlier, it's all about the portfolio, doing the right projects, focusing on the outcomes and benefit realization. You've got other cuts of this, which is capability realization. So a lot of PMO's job is to understand what capability they have and what's the capacity and how many projects they can do and so on and so forth. So I won't dwell too much on this, but in terms of where we are with the research now, there's a few things that's on the go. One is we're drafting a much more expansive article based on the research conducted. So to be fair, Joe's carrying the load on that, and we can get him away from talking to the Wall Street Journal, who are looking for him to give more commentary every so often. We may finish that off. What's also relevant is, look, we would like to develop some targeted questions to test the model and collect data from PMOs to baseline this framework, this one in particular, and understand, does this stack up, and where does the PMO community fit into that space? So we're going to be reaching out on this point. So hopefully all of the familiar names in this call, I know where you live now, we'll be coming looking to see if we can get your opinions around this stuff so we can start to build up some data and analyze that. And then the final thing is, I've been looking at PMO since I had black hair, and that's a long time ago, folks. So one of the things that was kind of surprising is there's no real anthology out there, you know, in terms of all the research. You know, I mean, I would know most of it, both through the academic lens and also the practitioner stuff. So we're going to pull that together, right? I think John's on the line from UL. We posed the question, are you going to do that academically or practitioner? So I'm kind of schizophrenic. I think I'll go for the white paper first, John, and then maybe use that. But at least I'll give a source in terms of, look, this is what's being written. Here's good practice and so on and so forth. So those are the three things. I'm very conscious of time, so I'll just leave it at that. So watch this space, because at the next event, we might ideally come back with some data and analysis. And ultimately, this is a community of practice. So down the line, we'll be stepping way back. And those on this call, hopefully, will start to take a more prominent role, Jackie, in terms of moving the agenda forward. So that's for me.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks, Terence. It's really exciting to see what's coming next. On that note, Jackie, I'm going to hand over to you and introduce Jackie Fagan, our president of the Ireland chapter of PMI.
Jackie, we would like to welcome you to present the national conference, please.
And in true style, I was on mute. So yeah, that was really interesting, guys. It's really great to see, like, from when we started launched the community practice in December, and how it's starting to grow and grow legs and that. And on that note, I think the conference, that the first face-to-face conference we're doing in 2 years since 2019, will be of interest to most on this call. As Joe and Brian have been talking about the PMO and the changing world of PMO and sustainability, and looking at ROI out into the future. PMI globally had run a megatrends, a pulse of the profession, and apart from what we find disrupting technology that's happening within our environment at the moment and globally, there's also 5 other mega trends happening, which will affect how we as project managers, PMO leads, will actually work in the future. To this end, then, we have a conference that's happening on the 18th of May. It is a face-to-face one. Obviously, when I looked at the Menti poll, which was actually very interesting about people looking for the hybrid, the gas thing is, guys, it actually costs twice as much to do the hybrid, but maybe that's something we need to look at in the future. So for this one, it's face-to-face. I won't read the slide. You can see there we have looked at the 6 mega trends. We've gone out to find key speakers, and sort of, if I say myself, we've got some very good top speakers in some of the areas that will actually walk through those mega trends, have an interactive sessions, and give you some key takeaways. So this isn't a speak at conference. Brezzy is our keynote speaker, and Tara Lockery is our MC. We've had prep sessions with each of the speakers. We're still in work in progress, but we had one there last week on Friday with Brezzy, and that is heading up to be an absolute fabulous session, both as a Q&A and a panel discussion, and as his talk. We talk about PMOs and sort of all the different things you need to do in a PMO, and he looks at it from a health perspective, finding peace in the chaos. Then we also have Minister of State and Business who will look at the economic things, and you can read through them yourself. We've some economists from Bank of Ireland and from Central Bank. We've got people then, we've got the Director of Transformation in ESB, and we've also got the Head of Sustainability. This has been sponsored by EY, Stephen Prendeville, and they have just brought out a paper on sustainability, and a bit like what you were saying about return on investment for the PMO, it's going to be coming that for projects, it's not just when you deliver the projects, it's going to be the ongoing sustainability, the end product or whatever it is. So the rates are there. The early bird is available up to the 3rd of May. We'd really love to see a lot of you at the conference. There's members and non-members rates there, and please either reach out to myself or to Chris if you're looking for group discounts. So I just encourage you to attend. Plus, if you're a PMI member and if you're trying to get your PTUs, you get 8 PTUs. So thank you, Santosh. I know it's rushed, but I know you're short on time and it's up.
Thanks a lot, Jackie. It is a good information. We all are looking forward for this in-person event after waiting for almost 2 years now. Looking forward to this interesting event. Hi all, we are almost come to the end of the webinar now. As you all know, you will get a PDUs for attending this session, this webinar. You will get 1 PDU. If you have registered with your PMI ID, you will get the PDUs allocated automatically to your account. If you are not, then you can still claim the PDU units using the claim code that is shown on the screen. Thanks a lot for your time to attend the webinar today. You have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye now. Have a good day.
Bye.